Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Pints and Perspectives. And as we always do, I want to give thanks to Left Hand Brewery for providing the space and the great beer. So let's give a hand to Eric Wallace and some of his staff. You know, Rachel and Jacob here. Yes, and by the way, the filming crew, the video, but this is going to be videotaped tonight. They all are. And this will be on YouTube, Eric, in what, 3 days or something like that?
No pressure.
4 days.
All right, sometime the next week. I'll put it that way. Okay, there you go, Eric. So, is there anybody in the audience, for Eric is our videographer tonight, is there anybody in the audience that doesn't want to be part of any video? Okay, think great. Then Eric, here we go. You guys can't say no to that. Yeah. They're our main speakers. So again, welcome to Pints and Perspectives. I'm Mike Butler, and I'm one of the co-founders of the School of Statesmanship, Stewardship, and Service, and we are partnering with Eric and Left Hand Brewery to bring you Pints and Perspectives. And most of you have been here in the past, but some of you might not have been. And so the way the evening goes is like this. We do a little introduction, and then we do a little bit of instruction from the School of Statesmanship, Stewardship, and Service. I'll let them figure out the technology here. And then we turn it over to some guest speakers. And tonight, Carol will introduce the guest speakers. The topic tonight, many of you know this, it's been advertised since the beginning of these sessions, is transportation and infrastructure. Some of you said this is the one you've been looking forward to, so here we are. And so thank you all again for being here. And so anyway, this is SOSIS and Left Hand Brewery that are sponsoring this, and we want to welcome all of you. The last thing I'm going to say before I turn it over to Carol to get started is there is a series of classes that are coming up that's being instructed by the School of Statesmanship, Stewardship, and Service. And so tonight, as we go through this first 20 to 30 minutes of a snippet, so to speak, of the classes that we're teaching, just know that these are snippets. But also know that these classes coming up are incredibly important. And the series topic, the topic for the series, come on in, folks, find a seat and welcome, is stewardship, choosing service over self-interest. It's a leadership model that this community hasn't necessarily been exposed to. And we're going to talk about it in a way that's, here's some of the theory, and here's the application, and that's how this is going to go. So anyway, so those classes begin September 10th. And did we bring any literature tonight for that? Okay, all right.
You'll get a free page with the flyer, and just tell them there's a discount code if you sign up for being here. Pints 30. You can put it in the coupon thing when you sign up. Melinda, I owe you $30 because you're right now. But if you put the discount, you get $30 off. So normally $99 for this, $69, because we want people to kind of be thinking, especially as we head into elections.
These classes are on Wednesday nights. September 10th is a Wednesday. There's 5 classes that are going to run successively from September 10th into October. And so we hope to see as many of you there as possible. I can guarantee you're going to enjoy them. So anyway, back to tonight. Once we introduce our guest speakers are going to talk about the topic of transportation and infrastructure. And then, as we always do, we're going to do a little Q&A with the guest speakers, or with Carol and I if something comes up in terms of something we said. And then after the Q&A, we're going to break into small groups. And we're going to ask you to answer one or all of these questions as we go forward into those small groups. And so here's one thing that we want you to consider and think about, though, in that small group. First of all, small groups work better if they're in 3 or 4, just 3 or 4. If it starts getting larger than that, people can tend to get shut out, and maybe their voices aren't as prominent as they'd like them to be. And so we've heard some concerns along those lines, and so I just want to pass that out. So as you move into small groups, it's 3 or 4. Carol and I and Eric and maybe Jake will help that happen. And so if we have to help facilitate so the groups are just 3 or 4, that's fine. That will give everybody an opportunity in that group to have a voice. And so one of the mantras we have is that everybody's voice counts, their thoughts matter, and their humanness is valued. And we take that very seriously. And so we want to make sure that in those small groups, that's what happens. And so I hope you understand that. And then we'll report back. Once a small group answers a question, we'll give you a few minutes. It won't be a long time, but each person will get an opportunity to say something. And then we'll come back and that small group will report out. We'll give you a little bit more instruction as we get to that point. Well, without any further ado, I want to introduce the co-founder of School of Statesmanship, Stewardship, and Service, Dr. Carol Engel Enright.
Okay, so it's transportation tonight, but I'm going to talk about mind and brain and neuroscience and emotions because it gets emotional, doesn't it? Really fast. When Eric brought this idea to us, he wanted it to be Pints in politics. And we thought, well, that's really fun. Beer bowl. And Jake came up with the perspectives name. So we're going to head into what is a perspective, what does it look like, and how do we move forward? It's great. It's a great thought, right? With transportation, how do you move from here to there? We're changing. Everything's in change. Everything's in flux. And sometimes that doesn't feel really good. It's like, I don't want it to change. Some people don't want anything to change. But change is going to happen. So how do we move gracefully, poised, with equilibrium? How do we navigate this journey, and how do we do it together? Enough division, right? We've had enough. So my little 7-year-old granddaughter said, Gammy, where do thoughts come from? Have you ever thought about that? Right? And where is the perspective? Is there a certain mindset? Is there a certain worldview? How do you form a thought? Do you get it from your parents? Do you get it from your friends? Do you get it from the things you read? Do you get it from your experiences? Do you get it from your emotional self? Do you get it from this inner guide that might talk to you? Do you get it from the environment? Do you get it from the news? Do you get it from your iPhone? Where do the thoughts come from? And I looked it up yesterday to make sure I was right on population. 8.142 billion last year. I don't know if it's going up or down this year, but that means each individual has a different perspective. If you're sitting with your partner, if you're sitting with your family, you still have different perspectives because you have different experiences. You always have from the time you were born. And I love that it, the research says personal philosophy. It's all personal. It's what you adopt in. So we've talked a lot through this series about different ideas, different theoretical things. But really, tonight we want to talk about what is happening as you're forming thoughts, as you think about transportation and infrastructure and what the future is going to look like, as you think about growing communities that serve all people. How can you start to go, well, I base that in time and place. I learned that, I often talk about my little Kansas midtown, 15,000. The downtown's gone. The population is gone. Transportation is not a concern there. There aren't enough people to have a traffic jam. But you guys have it, right? We have it. So think about time and place. What are the inner and the outer experiences? What is your economic condition? How does that affect how you think? What's happened to you? What are the moral trends that you're interested in? What's your education around that? What are the institutional influences and the political developments? I mean, things are shifting so fast right now, right? We all agree. So then, right behind where does a thought come from? Where does conflict come from? Because as we start to discuss these things, we don't want conflict in here, we want collaboration. We want people working together and being able to have different points of view, different perspectives, because there's 8.142 billion individual perspectives in this world, and everyone counts. So conflict is often small, but it arouses an emotion. Now, if you go into emotional intelligence and you get triggered, and everybody gets it, right? We're electrochemical. And somehow that brain and our nervous system connects and causes, might cause anger, it might cause panic, it might cause dread, it might cause stress. So being aware that conflict is coming, and it usually comes from something really small and a perceived, look at that, a perception of an unmet need. So I'm in a certain socioeconomic part of this community, and my needs are not being met. So I'm going to get angry. I'm going to protest. I'm going to show my force. But is that going to move you forward? Right? Okay. I'm going to turn this over to Mike because this is where he comes in. I'm talking about what happens.
Before I get to that slide, before I go back to that slide, I just want to say a little bit. For some of you get to know, some of you may not know, but I was the public safety chief in our community for a quarter of a century, and over a quarter of a century, and I oversaw police, fire, emergency management, and a few other social services for a length of time. And many of you know that the police have been in, they were kind of in a fishbowl, kind of like environment for a number of years. It started in Ferguson back in August of 2014, and kind of got ramped up again in Minneapolis with George Floyd, and a lot of high-profile incidents along the way. And so, anyway, I started with the city of Longmont for all intents and purposes in 1994. And I inherited an organization, I'm just going to say this, that was primitive in terms of how it saw service to the community, how it saw itself in terms of being very protective of itself, very defensive, circling the wagons. It was a faceless entity. They had almost zero kinds of partnerships in the organization. There were just a lot of attributes and characteristics of the organization that wasn't service oriented, and they were more concerned about themselves. And so we began going down a path of, I began the conversation of how do we become partners with our community? How do we begin to develop connections and relationships that are meaningful, that are long-lasting and sustainable? And not just the people who have in our community, but in particular to the people who don't have. Because for all of us who know, for any of you who know public service, especially in public safety, more often than not, the police and fire are going to most likely interact with those economically disadvantaged communities, the have-not communities. That has always been the case. And so whenever legislators at any level, whether it's city, state, or federal levels, have passed legislation, it's been mostly around those folks. It's mostly focused on those folks who don't have, or folks who are economically disadvantaged. And so I won't go a lot into that. I just wanted to give you a little background. So I came in 94, and I wanted to change the kind of the nature and the culture. And I really believed that we needed to transcend and shift the culture. Hey, Jake, come on in. You work here. This is your place. And I knew I would meet with some resistance, and I did meet with some resistance, quite a bit of resistance. Resistance even from the higher ups, and higher than me, the bosses of the organization, so to speak. Resistance from some of my peers. Resistance from people in the community who believe that, the way the police department needs to operate is we just need to arrest people. We need to invoke the criminal justice system. We're going to arrest our way out of our health and social issues in our community. We're going to take care of the woundedness in our community by putting people in jail. And I won't go into a lot of that, but that was how the resistance was coming. But the vast majority of resistance was coming from internal, the internal staff, especially the unions that we had. A couple of times they were after me in terms of doing what they call a no confidence vote. In terms of, we're going to do no confidence vote on you, Butler, because we believe you're trying to change our identity. We believe you're trying to change us. And so I ran across a lot of resistance. And I won't say much more than that. And there's a lot more to that story. But on the other hand, I think you get the gist and the nature of where I'm headed. And so I learned a lot about resistance. And I learned a lot about how we can maybe transcend resistance. And so this is the nature. And so again, for those who missed this earlier, we got some more people coming in, I think. These are snippets. There's a lot more time we spend on this than the time I'm spending. Welcome, come on in. Come on in. No. Come on in. Welcome. We're happy you're here. We wish you'd have been here 10 minutes ago, but we're happy you're here. Anyway, we're happy you're here. So, the resistance came in a lot of forms, and I'm marking up the three biggest ones here. And so again, this is just a snippet of how leaders. I know we have some elected officials in the room. We have some maybe former elected officials, and we have some people who want to be elected officials, and we may have people who are leaders in organizations, maybe in the private sector, or maybe you're an appointed official in this community or another community. Or something along those lines. And so I'm not saying this is for everybody, but the focus is how do you deal with resistance. And so I said, I don't want to be a faceless entity in this community anymore. I want to develop partnerships. I want to figure out how we can become more connected to this community. I want to figure out how we can surface, activate, and coordinate the immense amount but untapped social capital in our community. Come on in. Welcome. And so that was the gist of what we were trying to do. And there was tremendous resistance to that. And so, but the other part of this for me in resistance is you have to honor it. You can't sit there and deny it. You can't sit there and say it shouldn't exist. And you can't patriarchally deal with it. You have to deal with it in a way that's where these folks are coming from. So what do you do? What do you do differently to try to transcend the resistance? And so the three types of resistance I'm going to talk about. First one is a bystander, a person who's present but doesn't take part. They withhold commitment. What we're looking for ultimately is some faith, some conviction, some commitment, and a sense of sustainability about those things. That's what I wanted from our staff. That's what I wanted from the community eventually. And so they feel less responsible in terms of acting because they just kind of assume someone else will take care of it. This is kind of a passive form of resistance, but it's there in our midst. And they fear the social judgment or making a mistake there. And they're fence sitters as well. And they want data. They want data. They want to show that there's proof that this works somewhere else. And so they want data, they want information, and they want to know that there's proof that it works somewhere else before they'll take action, before they'll make a commitment, before they'll do something that says, I have faith in what we're going to be trying to do. So that's one form of resistance. Another form of resistance many people are aware of is cynics. And so cynics, what's interesting about their story is they're partially right. They realize that there's been programs and things that have been tried in the past that didn't work. And so here you are, Butler. You're just another program of the month guy. And so this isn't going to work either. And so the people kind of have been through, I've been here before you and I'll be here after you. I heard that. And for those of us who've been in leadership positions, you'll hear that. And so there's that sense of cynicism. The rub is they're partially right. They believe people are motivated by people are motivated by self-interest, and so they're pessimistic in how they think and what they do. And so and by the way, they can be a large voice in your organization or in your community in terms of of what that looks like. There's the cynic. Here's what's wrong. Here's what we need to be afraid of. Here's why we shouldn't go down that path that Butler wants to go down. And so the next kind of cynic are victims. These people feel helpless. They feel hopeless. Their sense is they really don't have any power to make any change. They just kind of hide in the shadows, so to speak. And sometimes they're real victims. Sometimes they are real victims. There's no question, ifs, ands, or buts about that. But sometimes they've been kind of skilled trying to be a victim. And so that's how they're coming across. And so they're subject to oppression. They've been subject to oppression, hardship, or mistreatment. They lose faith in other things. It's hard for them to kind of take action because they do feel helpless. And so we have the bystanders, the people who kind of are sitting on the fence and want proof. We have the cynics, people who are partially right because they've been through programs or they've been through other things that didn't work, and here you are just with another one. And then we have victims. So this is what I confronted. These are the three main kind of forces and energies that we confronted in our organization at that time. So the question is, how do you transcend that? Or how do you, at the very least, neutralize it? Because I think at some point, maybe the best we can do is neutralize it. But how do we transcend that in a way that we can move on? And so, and for those of you who haven't been here in the past, I do come from the perspective, whether you're a cynic, a victim, or bystander, that you have this sense of, I believe people have unlimited capacity. I don't see people as being error-prone, weak, or limited. That's not my lens. My lens is something different. And so even though people are expressing their reservations, their doubts, or even saying no, I'm okay with that because at least they're expressing something. And for me, the enemy of real faith, the enemy of real conviction is lip service, not a commitment. The enemy of what no is not the enemy of yes, in my opinion. So anyway, that's where we come from. And this is a quote by a friend of mine who wrote a book called Stewardship. Peter Block, best-selling author. Part of what we're going to be discussing in our classes is coming in September is coming from his work. We cannot choose adventure and then promise safety to get people to come with us. And so there is when we go on an adventure, I mean, there's going to be some hardship along the way. There's going to be some trial and error. There's going to be 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. So that's part of that. So how do we transcend resistance? First thing we do is acknowledge. We acknowledge their perspective. We name other programs that didn't work. Yeah, I know that. I know these things didn't work. We acknowledge their sense of helplessness for the victims. I know that. I every now and then I get that feeling as well. This is the honoring process of saying, I know where you're coming from. We have the same doubts. We have the same reservations. I do. I had to, but here's where we're headed. We support their desire to have more data and more proof. We wished we did. I used to, this person seems like she has a lot of pints. This is pints, plural, and perspectives. Come on in. Welcome. All right. Yeah, great. So at some level, that's where this is the transcending part. We state our own choice for conviction and faith. I have to be very clear about that. Sometimes I believe that the only thing I had as an antidote to the sacrificing, that kind of sacrifice I was making, the only thing I have is my own conviction. And I know some of you have felt that way if you've been in leadership positions, that you're the only voice in the wilderness. And sometimes it's that conviction and that strength that's going to carry the day. And I said it the other day in a group that I was in, and I forget where I was at, but I was at a study group meeting with another book that we are studying. And I just said, this person had a lot of people kind of defer to them because they were the strongest person in the room. They had faith, they had conviction. And you'll find that that's often the case, that the person who has that strength, that conviction, that sense of faith are the people that end up being in these kind of leadership positions. And so we state our choice for commitment and faith. In the face of our own reservations, our conviction is our strength, and all we need is our willingness to begin. And that's what I asked these folks to do, is a willingness to begin. And so I acknowledged it, I stated these were the statements. And then maybe the last thing in honoring people is that what I didn't do was force people. What I didn't do was mandate. What I didn't do was threaten. What I didn't do was say, if you don't do it, this is going to happen, a negative consequence. Because we didn't want to have an organization that was kind of changing based on mandate or based on the person in top is in charge. And so,
for future reference, there is a silence button on those beepers. So when you get beeped, you can turn the beep.
I hope everybody knows that, by the way. But thank you for that reminder.
The new ones don't have a button.
Oh, never mind. Live and learn. Sorry.
All right.
Hey, we're paying for the place, okay?
If we, you know what, we're okay. We're okay with this. We're okay with the disruption, as long as you're okay with it. This is Pints and Perspective. We're doing this in a brewery, okay? What do you think the founders found when they were starting to talk about common sense? Thomas Paine reading to common sense back in the 1770s. And so anyway, here we are. They had guns.
After acknowledge disruption.
So anyway,
Then we can invite them to make
here we are.
choices.
So this was in a way. So I didn't mandate, I didn't force, and I really wanted to have a long term. And so the idea of inviting people became important. And one of the things we teach that we're not going to talk about tonight is the power of a quality invitation. And for those of you who are in leadership positions, whether you're elected officials, appointed officials, or whether you want to be in those positions, I think everybody needs to learn the essence of what a quality invitation is all about. And because a quality invitation has incredible power attached to it. And I'm not going to go into all of that tonight. We teach a class on how to provide a quality invitation for people. One of the most high quality invitations I ever read was Ernest Shackleton. Anybody ever heard of him? Yeah, he was an explorer in the Antarctic. He wrote an article, he wrote an ad, and I think it was in the London Times, and he said, need men to go to Antarctica. Poor food, lousy pay, safe return doubtful. You got 5,000 people to show up. And so anyway, a very powerful invitation. I'm not going to go into all of what goes into an invitation.
That was a bad choice.
Yeah. There were a lot of people looking for work back then. All right. Okay, so I'm running out of time. So anyway, I just want to say we can get involved in arguments. We can get involved in debates. We can. All right, here we go. We may have to open that back door, Eric. We have to open that back door. So anyway, this is not where we want to go, and you can read this. I'm running out of time, Carol tells me. So you can take a photo of that or read that or come to one of our classes, and we're going to be talking more about it. But we replace arguments with invitations. And that is a big way of dealing with resistance, folks, is letting people make the choice to move forward. So anyway, how many of you have heard of Viktor Frankl? Viktor Frankl, Searching the Meaning of Life, I believe it's called. And so anyway, Viktor Frankl, for those of you who don't know, served in a Nazi concentration camp. His family was killed. Of course, he was tortured and beaten along the way, but he rose above it all. And he wrote this incredible book. And he ended up coming up with this kind of model, that for every stimulus we have, between the stimulus and the response we have, and I'm going to short circuit this, is a place called freedom. And we have freedom to make the choices we want to make after every stimulus that we have. And so this gets into what Carol was talking about in terms of conflict and how we are in terms of where we're at with this polarization and divisiveness. So remember this. We're not going to go into this deeply tonight, but this is an important way to think in terms of just because the stimulus may kind of trigger something doesn't mean I need to respond to the trigger. And Viktor Frankl was one of the greatest examples. There's others of this as well. So anyway, I'm going to give this one back to Carol.
Well, you can read it, but we're all about possibilities here. I do a lot of study in design thinking and coming up with ideas, and so tonight is about collaborating with others and coming up with ideas, listening to we have subject experts on transportation and building out infrastructure. How many have even thought about infrastructure? Okay, good. Because, I haven't been thinking about where does the power come from? Where does the heat come from? Where does the water come from? How do we keep the air clean? How do we have roads that reach everywhere? And I'm going to ask you this. We're just going to move right into our speakers, so they have plenty of time. But I am going to ask you this. Have you ever sat in traffic and
Yes.
have you ever gotten angry while you were sitting in traffic?
Not really.
Yeah. Was it a choice to do that?
To get angry.
And I'll tell you, when I met Mike Butler, one of the first questions he gave me when I was upset one time was, "What are you contributing to the thing you complain about the most?"
We knew each other pretty well. Almost the first thing kind of thing.
Yeah. So I just want to say, and there's a whole lot more we can say about it. There's two parts of your nervous system. There's the sympathetic nervous system, and there's the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system deals with love and gratitude and caring and compassion, and you can get there by just simply saying thank you. So when you're over here in this fear, anger, I can't believe I'm sitting here in traffic for 15 minutes. Go here. Give thanks that you have a city that cares, that you have a city that's working on it, that you have people, you have planners, you have people who are good at coming up with plans. So we have Erin, and many of you know her, and we're really happy she's here. Erin worked in the city. She's a planner for 20 years. She's worked on urban planning and economic development, two really big parts of this, right? So if you bring in the economic people, if you bring in new businesses, how do you support the infrastructure that brings in the business? Or if you bring developers in, how do you make sure all that infrastructure, all those traffic things are worked with? She was here with Longmont Economic Development. She's now with this company called Track. And look it up, because it was fascinating for me to go through their website. We're all hearing about the power centers and what's going to happen in the future. But are we really exploring that and going on a discovery tour about what that means for us? Do you just want to say, no, I don't want to do that? Or are you going to go along and be a partner with Future? Are you going to share with that? Are you going to do some great things with it? I love this. She's passionate about placemaking and public engagement. So I know she works with all the business owners and has in Longmont. In terms of thinking about what do we need, and then what do the residents need as well? How do we build a whole, safe, complete? I like the word complete on the emerging trends. They talk about complete streets. And she works, she's got her master's. And then Miguel, and I told him, I heard him speak, it might have been a year ago, at a Rotary presentation. And he was energetic and young and fresh with new ideas and can do, this great attitude. He now works for the town of Erie as their principal transportation. And they might be having some issues over there because they're growing, right? So he's working not only with the city, but regionally. How do we start to think? If any of you are watching all the magazines and the New York Times, they're all talking about how does the region start to plan and the municipality plans together? How do they work in partnership? We talk about partnership all the time. So at Erie, he's done bike infrastructure, pedestrian crossings. If any of you have been on County Road 1, you've probably seen his work, right? That's yours. Is that right? Anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Erin and Miguel, and we have to switch computers real quick. So,
Now would be the time to do a refill.
No, don't let him. This is the clicker. Okay, take it away.
No, don't take a break because everyone loves transportation and infrastructure. Miguel and I won't be offended if you get up to do a refill. So we'll awkwardly shuffle around for a minute while we figure out how we can sit. So first of all, I want to thank Miguel. He and I work together in Erie, and I really appreciate him coming to Longmont. Neither of us currently work in Longmont, but I know many of you in the audience, and if you know me, then you know how much I love Longmont. And so hopefully we'll do this justice. We are going to talk about transportation and infrastructure. Thank you for the intro, Carol. I think you have a good sense of our backgrounds. Both of us are professional planners, and so we work a lot with transportation and infrastructure planning, implementation, and we hopefully will go through some general information today. And then we'll try to give you some Longmont specifics. I'm going to go ahead and caveat this with, again, neither of us are currently working in Longmont. I've been involved in planning in Longmont for a long time, not for the past year or so. There's a lot of people in the audience. I was kind of joking that when I came here, I can, defer to people who are on the transportation board, who are on council, who are working on projects here, who know a lot about Longmont, so I might call on you if there's a difficult question later in the Q&A, okay? But what we're going to go through is planning for transportation and utility infrastructure. Many of you, if you've been to a council meeting, you hear people come up and say, you didn't think about this, you didn't think about drainage, you didn't think about electric capacity. Well, spoiler alert, we did, and there's a lot that we can talk about in terms of planning for infrastructure and tying that to growth projections and future land use, so we'll talk through that. Also, another spoiler, transportation is me and Miguel's favorite topic out of transportation and infrastructure, so we'll probably spend the most time talking about transportation. But I think that's probably okay, because that's probably what you all want to talk about anyway. We're going to talk about congestion, which is also a favorite topic. So I think Miguel's going to cover that one. We'll pass that off to him. And then we'll kind of end talking about the city's recently completed transportation mobility plan, and that's really a prioritization of what do we want our transportation system to look like in the future. How are we going to prioritize? What's the planning horizon? And there's some really great documentation on the city's website. There's a really great story map that I can point you to if you want more information. And then we'll end with Q&A and discussion. I will say if you have a burning question about something Miguel and I say, you can feel free to raise your hand and we'll take it during the presentation if you're okay with that. Okay. And we're going to kind of tag team. So I was a bad co-presenter and gave Miguel the slides a little late, and so there may be things that he's like, wait, you forgot to say that, and we'll just tag team it kind of informally. So what is infrastructure? I think we kind of all know what infrastructure is, but what we're going to be talking about tonight is really the physical and organizational systems that support the city, right? A lot of these are underground and we can't actually see them. Some of these things, we've come as society to we turn on our water, we turn on our lights, and it just happens. There's a lot behind that. All of that is infrastructure. So infrastructure is really the physical assets, so the hard infrastructure. That's all of your transportation systems, which again, we'll spend time talking about tonight. Your roadways, your bridges, your sidewalks and bike paths in other locations, maybe ports, rail, airports, things of that nature. Parks and stormwater, we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about this. I know you've had a session, I think, on sustainability, resilience, green infrastructure. Probably covered some of that, but I think it's important to think about those as parts of our infrastructure system because they're incredibly important. And there's some really neat innovations in terms of city building with those. Water and sewer, certainly. Electric, telecommunication. And then there's kind of the institutions and soft systems, which Mike and Carol talk a lot about in their program, so we won't go into that. But I think one thing that I want everyone to keep in mind is that coordinated infrastructure planning, especially with transportation and utilities, is really essential for planning and managing growth. And so as we're building our cities, as we're continuing to develop either through infill, through greenfield and new development, which I think you also had a session on, it's really important for us to be thinking about these things. It's important for us to continue to monitor trends. It's important for us to stay on the forefront of technology and think about the impact that has on our communities. It's important for a number of reasons, and there's some really cool infrastructure out there, some also not so cool infrastructure, but I didn't put any pictures of that up here. But infrastructure can really contribute to quality of life, right? We've all been in places where we've walked across the Millennium Bridge, maybe in Denver, that connects us to downtown. It helps develop places, super great bike paths or corridors. It supports economic development. Carol mentioned that economic development is a passion of mine. If we have great infrastructure, that can help bring businesses. I think locally, a really good example of that here is our Next Light fiber network. That is something that Longmont can be and should be extremely proud of, and that is really directly pulling businesses to the city. Also supports public health in terms of clean water, wastewater, things of that nature. Safety, certainly in terms of our transportation system, but even as we think about electricity, water, wastewater, and I'm sure there's a number of other items that we can speak about. What we're really going to focus on today is sort of the planning and funding. I do want to mention that operations and maintenance are incredibly important components. For my friends in the audience who are on city council or running for city council, this is like the non-sexy part of transportation and utilities, is the maintenance and operations piece. Like, you're not going to probably have residents coming to the podium to be like, please, give us money for maintenance and operations. You might, but generally those aren't the sexy projects, right? People want to see new stuff, and so we're really going to focus, Miguel and I, on the planning and funding piece, but just know that really to have a good system of infrastructure, you need all of these things to be considered. So as we're talking about planning and funding infrastructure, what we're going to cover tonight is really kind of the modeling, forecasting, and planning, costs, local and regional coordination, and I'll talk just briefly right now about financing. One of the things that I want everyone to kind of realize that's unique for Longmont, and this gets into the financing piece, is that Longmont is a little bit unique in that it's a complete community in terms of providing most of its utilities, and that's not the case with all communities. A lot of communities are financing things differently. They may have special districts or metro districts. They may have other providers. And it's not a judgment, neither good nor bad, but it does allow Longmont to coordinate in terms of its planning, growth, and development in a unique way. And so that's something that's good to think about as you're contemplating planning for growth, providing service to folks throughout the community. It is a little bit easier when you have everyone working together. I'll briefly touch on financing, and if you have questions about this, I don't have another slide, but this is really important. Many communities, including Longmont, sort of have a policy that growth should pay its own way, and that really means how does new growth, how do new residents pay for infrastructure, how do we contribute to the system? And one way that we do that is through impact fees and having development pay for improvements. So developments are required to pay their share of the growth that results in system-wide need. And so, and you can talk about this from Erie's perspective if there's questions, but essentially when a new home is built, they are required to pay a park fee, a transportation community investment fee, a public buildings fee, things that are going to result in growth of the system. And so impact fees are something that have been allowed by law. Many, many communities use them, and they're a way to finance infrastructure. Obviously, we all pay utility bills, we all pay surcharges. Those local funds can go back into the system, often for operations and maintenance. Impact fees can't really be used for operations and maintenance. We'll talk a little bit more about state and federal funding. That's a big piece of transportation, can also be pretty big when we talk about regional water projects and things of that nature. Special districts, Longmont doesn't typically use special districts and metro districts, but many, many communities form water districts, wastewater districts, library districts, whatever it is, to assess property tax typically to pay for infrastructure. Obviously bonds, we've done that here in Longmont. Public-private partnerships, particularly with redevelopment projects, the city may partner with another entity, a private developer, to fund infrastructure and utility projects. And then there may be some other methods that we can talk about as well. Full disclosure, this is a ChatGPT generated infrastructure costs. The point of this slide is really to let you know that infrastructure is wildly expensive. So you can look and see cost per mile, cost per linear foot for transportation facilities, for water lines, for water treatment plants. I did a quick look on the city's website. The water plant expansion was estimated at 73 million. Electric substations, as Carol mentioned, I'm working in an industry where we're looking at power generation. Those are in the millions or tens of millions of dollars. And so these are not costs that can really just be borne by a resident. We need to share those costs. We need to be innovative in how we finance things. I will also say that these costs are highly dependent on a number of external factors. And so putting a per linear foot or per mile cost, or even frankly a per facility cost, is a little bit challenging because we need to look at the local and site conditions. You know, Longmont is a community that doesn't have a ton of land left, so therefore land costs more than it does in other locations. That's going to potentially impact cost. What materials are you using? What are the current economic conditions locally, regionally, or nationally that are affecting supply chain? What's the size of the facility you need? So just know that these costs can be highly dependent on external factors. But certainly they're really important, and they do tend to, drive the cost of, for many of us, our housing, our businesses, our public buildings.
That's pretty good for AI, because I was looking at that, I was thinking this is Longmont, and I was like, oh, that's pretty close to what Erie's are, our numbers are, so good job.
Okay, good, yeah. AI does a good job sometimes. I did look at the cities, but yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Thanks, Miguel. So just real quick, I think many of you know this, transportation funding is a little bit different. We are part of the Denver Regional Council of Government, which is the region's, is it 9 county or 10 county now? 10 county?
I believe it's still 9.
9 county?
Yeah, 9 county.
9 county regional metropolitan planning organization, so they're responsible for doling out federal funds. There's a complicated formula for that, and they do that kind of based on where we are in the region. But essentially, we're getting bipartisan funding. We're also getting funding from fuel tax, and then that's coming down from the region, allocated to counties and municipalities to support projects like, I think probably the 119 project is probably the easiest example.
Yeah, that's a good example. And then a lot of the state highways are usually funded through Dr. Cog, and so, but the municipalities and counties get to choose the projects that are important to them, and so then that money is funneled down through Dr. Cog, goes to the counties or even the cities and towns sometimes, and then they get to fund their projects that way.
And that's all kind of done through a 5-year TIP or transportation improvement program. And so those projects are really laid out at that regional level with input from the local governments, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's, I will say, I've been to a couple of them for my first time, and it is almost like a brawl of
a cage match.
Because the cities, there's only a certain amount of money that's available, and so all the cities and towns and counties are fighting for that money, and so they're presenting the projects and they're making their case. And our town needs this. No, our city needs this, and then they have to decide. All right, we have to cut half of these projects out because there's not enough funding, and so your government officials are fighting to the bone for the funding, and so they're doing the best that they can when there's only 20 million available for Boulder County or something like that.
So imagine our city council meetings with 7 people, and then imagine a Dr. Cog meeting with 50 plus people. That gives you an idea of what that cage match might look like. So we can talk more about Dr. Cog. I should have mentioned, I'm going to back up to my very beginning slide and give credit to Phil Greenwald, former transportation planning manager, and Ben Ortiz, current planner at the city of Longmont. They helped Miguel and I out with some of these slides. We had put together a resident planning academy a number of years ago, so I don't think anyone in this audience did that, but if you did and this looks familiar, that's where some of these slides are from.
Yeah, and also, if you don't know, Phil just retired from the city of Longmont.
Yes.
He was with them for 25 years, 30, something like that.
Yeah.
So he was a great guy to work with, so I learned a lot from him.
Yeah, so if he would have been here tonight, he could have heard us giving him kudos. So everyone tell him that. Okay, so how do we fund improvements locally? This again is a transportation example. So our revenue sources are really sales and use tax for projects, the state highway use tax, and then all other sources together. How do we spend our funds? We spend the majority of our funds on maintenance, which is probably not that surprising if you start to think about it. Rehab projects, capital projects, which those would be the big ticket items, new things, large. These could still be replacements, but these are the larger projects that are probably millions of dollars.
Yeah, I'd say in the transportation world, it's anything that's pavement or concrete that gets put down on the roads. But then others are like facilities, like a new recreation center or a police facility. Those kind of things are capital as well.
So for those of you who are on council or looking at joining council, you'll see the capital improvement plan, CIP, come to you with the budget annually. It's really a 5-year plan, but there's like a 1-year budget. And then obviously there's operating budgets that are also paying for these improvements. So talking a little bit about how do we plan for infrastructure and transportation, utilities and infrastructure, really there's a lot that goes into this. Envision Longmont is the city's comprehensive plan, and so this is really the city's future land use and transportation system. And really this is important because it allows us to model, forecast, and plan for growth. And so the city of Longmont has done a really good job in thinking about land use and transportation as a system together. We'll talk here in just a second about transportation is part of infrastructure, but it also really functions as a land use because it's above ground and it takes space. But we are able to, and Miguel will talk more about this, we're able to model, we're able to forecast trips, we're able to look at level of service and intersections and volumes and know what types of improvements we might need to make as certain areas of the city grow for the first time or grow and change to maybe a different use or a more intensive use. We're also able to do this with water. We can take a look at parcel by parcel, how much water does each land use, and then we can see based on number of fixtures, density of residential, types of businesses, how much water might we expect a new use to use. And then that really allows us to think about, as our community quote unquote builds out, which communities don't ever really build out, but as we build out into our planning area, what are our needs going to be in the future? And so we do all of that locally. We also work closely with organizations like Dr. Cog and our neighbors, thinking about water, wastewater, to think about how do we fit in with, for example, the region. Obviously, people are commuting into Longmont, people are leaving Longmont and going elsewhere. We need to think about those regional trips as we're planning for facilities. So we rely on historic data. Again, I mentioned that we're looking at people's usage, we're looking at travel patterns. We also look at demographic trends, so we can think about how the community is expected to grow, what are our growth rates, what type of growth are we expecting with regard to the type of demographic trends that we're going to see, what might we expect in terms of travel patterns or water usage. For a good example might be as we see households start to change, maybe historically we saw a lot of single family detached that were built on a quarter acre. That's probably going to use more water than something that's higher density without a yard, right? And so that impacts our future water use. And then the last piece that I'll mention with regard to kind of planning is we also have the community's vision and priorities. And so there's historic trends, there's things that are going to happen, but there's also priorities and decisions that our policymakers can make, that our community can make, that can kind of shift that. And so, for example, water conservation in Colorado is becoming more and more important to people, and so people are making different decisions which then can impact future water use. So we look at that as well. So just quickly to touch on, and again, I'm not an engineer. I've never even played one on TV. There's probably people that know a lot more about this than me in the audience, so speak up and keep me honest. The city's done a really great job of planning for water, wastewater, electricity, and I would really, commend folks that came even long before Mike and I at the city that had the foresight to really invest in water and wastewater systems. And so there's a number of plans that guide water usage in the city. Here's a couple of them. How do we use our raw water? How do we conserve water? That's laid out in the Water Efficiency Master Plan. What do we do in a drought? And so the city's really, really taking an active role in thinking about this, which is important. They've got 12 guiding principles, which really guide kind of what they do with water, and you can look at those online. This is a map of sort of the water system, and you can see water that's owned by the city, where the treatment facilities are, where the distribution exists. And then the other couple things I'll mention, and we can go into this more in Q&A, but in the interest of time I won't belabor this. There's some important coordination and requirements with development. And so with regard to water specifically, when new land comes into the city and city council decides to annex it, the city requires that land turn over all of their historic water, and that becomes part of the city's portfolio. The city has a requirement for what that is, and if I own an acre of land and I have no water with it, then I need to pay into that system. And so really what the city is saying is that growth is going to contribute its fair share, and if you don't have the water to bring for your development or your existing land, then you're going to pay into the system, and we're going to go out to the market and buy that. And so that's really set the city up. And if you've watched the news, you know that not every community is in that same space. So Longmont's done a good job with that, which again helps with our infrastructure planning. I'll also mention that the city has a great industrial pre-treatment program, which really thinks about water treatment and how businesses use water, and so making sure that our water stays safe and clean. We talked a little bit about demand forecasting and infrastructure and capacity projects, so I'll kind of skip over that.
I'm going to mention this is incredible, but there's the pipeline, the Colorado Big Thompson project from Grand Lake. It's the black line with arrows. That's on the other side of the Continental Divide. So we built a pipe to pump water towards the Front Range because we do not have enough. And so that is a huge project, and it's like an engineering marvel for Colorado. So that's huge for Colorado to do that.
And obviously many communities are involved in that, right?
Oh yeah.
So touching on electricity, telecommunications, obviously we all know that we have Longmont Power, we have Nextlight, we're incredibly fortunate. Visionary leaders, 100 plus years ago, we get our power from Platte River Power Authority. And you can see here, I took this snapshot earlier this week about how Platte River is producing their energy, and so obviously it varies over the course of the day, but this is pretty cool. You can go on and take a look at that. Our city has a goal of being 100% renewable by 2030. Our partners at Platte River have similar goals, and so they're investing in different types of energy solutions, and I would encourage you to reach out to folks in Longmont Power because they are doing a lot around virtual power plants and distributed energy. The technology is increasing incredibly in terms of battery storage. We can have a whole separate conversation about our power needs as a society and what that looks like going forward, and I think that's a conversation we probably should have. But power needs are growing exponentially, and there's a lot of work being done to think about different sources. Next slide, I mentioned how important this is from an economic development perspective. I think we can also think about this from an education perspective and kind of level setting with giving all of our students, all of our community access to broadband internet. And then, certainly we do coordinate with other organizations. I will mention again with development, when someone comes into the city, they are required to get service from Longmont Power. So if they're in a different service territory, there may be a buyout required, and so all of that is coordinated at the time of development. Okay, we're going to shift to transportation now, which is the passion. So I do want to start by saying we're going to talk about transportation both as infrastructure and land use. So it's doing double duty. We're going to get a little philosophical for 3 slides, and then we'll go back to reality. So this is Denver in 1911, and I think it looks lovely. Streetcars, we can, there's a lot of places that we've all been where it's like, oh yeah, there used to be a streetcar here, it's a streetcar suburb, and they tore it out, and now it's not. So you can see Denver had a ton of streetcars, and those first inner ring suburbs were streetcar suburbs, and you can go there today and sort of see the land use pattern that developed around these. And then between these rail lines, when the car came into prominence, the areas filled in. People had many more travel opportunities, and that happened everywhere in the country. Particularly in the West, this had a lot of impacts on our land use patterns. And you can see that right here in Longmont. So this is Main and 3rd, circa 1910. There's not really any cars, right? We see a lot of other modes, walking, carriages. I think there's a bicycle in here somewhere. And then you see just 10 years later, the landscape looks vastly different, right, with cars. And so we're not here, well, those of you who know me know I do have a lot of opinions about this, but we're not here to pass judgment on the car. However, what's important about the conversation for today is what impacts that has had on the ways our cities have developed, the ways that we move around, our safety, our health. And so as we think about infrastructure going into the future, it's important for us to think about our past. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Miguel. to talk a little bit about what this
Also,
means.
just to reference all the trolleys and the streetcars, like as a kid, I loved the movie Roger Rabbit, but never understood it. And now as an adult, I look back at it and was like, oh my gosh, I love this movie even more. It's so good because that's exactly what it was talking about. It's like the car was coming in and they wanted to put in a freeway and they were taking out all the trolleys, and the judge wanted to buy out the trolley system. And so like, you know, it means so much more to me now. So that's a great movie. So all right, so we're gonna go into transportation. And so yes, I've worked for CDOT, RTD, and consulting firm. So I kind of have a good background and knowledge on all these components, especially when it ties into Colorado. But I don't know all the answers, and if I don't know the answer, I would love to figure it out for you and get back to you. So here we have your standard, typical American land use and layout of an American city. So you have your large freeways, you have your commercial corridors with all your individual businesses with their own plot of land, with their drive-through, with their own access point from the arterial road into the business. And then you have your standard suburban layout of single-family dwellings. And so we'll probably use that term a lot, single-family dwellings or household. And as you can see, it's the typical cul-de-sac with the homes all lined up around the cul-de-sac. And I'm going to make a point that cul-de-sac has, I counted them, 15 households. And we'll remember that number for later when we do math. We have a math component to the slides. So I'm also going to reference my notes because I took some good ones and I want to make sure I hit those points. So another piece about that land use, just to hit on transit, so we'll reference it later, but transit to be successful needs to have 15 dwelling units per acre. And I'm assuming that land use is probably 3, 4 at most dwellings per acre. So just to give you an idea that would not support transit. And so transit would fail. And of course RTD would say, well, there's no ridership, so we're gonna kill the route. And then they lose their route. So just wanna reference that.
What's your description of the bottom center slide?
Bottom center, well, they're not, first off, oh my gosh, I hate it, my mind goes all over the place when it's transportation. So first off, I see the ramp from the sidewalks into the crosswalks, not ADA compliant. It's single direction, so when you use the ramp to get to the crosswalk, you don't know which crosswalk you're going into. So if you're blind, you don't know where the crosswalk is. You're just being thrown into the middle of the intersection. And so now communities are having bi-directional ramps and crosswalks, so where it leads you into the crosswalk that you want to get into. So you're either going north and south or you're going east and west. So so that's the first. This, you can't really see it, but this crosswalk looks like it looks diagonal, but actually it might not be. But if it was diagonal, that would be an issue. Again, not ADA compliant. I would also prefer this median to come out a little more to provide what's called a pedestrian refuge island, to allow the pedestrian to cross one lane at a time and not have to focus in both directions and run. They can focus on the traffic coming from the left, get into the pedestrian island, then focus on the traffic on the right. And I'm glad that the median does not have any trees or brush vegetation that's taller than a person, because we have a problem with that in Erie right now, because that creates what's called a sight distance issue. So those are just a few right off the bat.
I would say it's essentially a boulevard, right? We have a couple of those in Longmont. On the positive side, I would say the walk is detached, but the tree lawn's too small. You could never have a tree in that small space. The sidewalk's also pretty narrow. But there probably is room to add a bike lane, because those lanes are wide, even though they're in one direction. So
yeah, those are great points. Yeah, and the other thing too, in transportation, you have either attached sidewalk, which means it's right against the curb and right against the road, or it's detached, and so that means there's a tree lawn or a patch of grass between the sidewalk and the road. And in our world, we prefer it to be about 8 feet apart, the sidewalk from the road.
And Longmont does require detached walks.
Same with Erie.
So by removing the trees and increasing sight lines, don't you also increase speed?
In a way, it does give the appearance of allowing the driver to speed, but then there are other mitigation efforts. You can try to get the drivers to slow down. So depending on what kind of road this is, I'm going to guess it's a collector, or it might be an arterial.
All right, I'm going to pull us back. I'm pulling us back. We're going to the next slide because we're gonna design this roadway, which we can do at the
Let's
end.
put enforcement out there. All right, here we have some walkable communities, and so we have Washington Street in Boston. We have Denmark. We have Pearl Street. All of us know that, and then we even have Venice Beach, which is down in LA. So I just want to bring the point on this: the pedestrian malls are amazing, and pedestrian walkways. Because when this environment happens, businesses boom. It's kind of crazy. And a story from 1971, back in Brazil, the mayor of Curitiba, he wanted to put in a pedestrian mall in one of the neighborhoods. And of course, it's not the U.S., so they have different laws down there. And he was able to do it in 72 hours. Shut down the street, constructed a whole pedestrian walkway, and by Monday morning, you have this pedestrian mall. The business owners were mad. They didn't want that to happen. But what happened? What was the result? Their sales went up. Business boomed for all those businesses along that walkway. So they're a good thing. And again, one other thing about it is that when you're driving, if these were streets, I want to say you don't have time to smell the roses. So you're just going to pass by all these businesses. You're not going to even know these cute little businesses were here, where you can go to a gift shop or go buy a cute gift for whoever. But when it's a pedestrian mall or a walkway, you can, and businesses are going to thrive from that. So that's going to, it's like a trickle-down effect, and it has, everything's connected. That if people are spending money, your business is growing, you're hiring more people, you're contributing to the economy. So it's just like a ripple effect. And so these are great things to have.
The caveat that I would put on this, not to be a wet blanket, I think the thing that a lot of these places have that many communities that we live in, probably including Longmont, is a density of residents or a high density of visitors, right? And so, not suggesting that it wouldn't ever fly here, but I think a lot of businesses can also thrive when there's auto traffic, because a lot of people do drive. And so, I know I put this slide together, so I do think it's important to think about, you can still mimic many of these characteristics. These are sort of the best examples, right, of pedestrian malls in the area that we know, and also I added Denmark just because I was there a couple of years ago and it is incredible. But you can still have a compact urban form with higher densities, mixed use, walkable environments, managed or limited parking, bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and autos together. So just keep that in mind as we're talking about our system.
Yeah, so those were forms of density, and so density can be good sometimes. So let's see. So planning for a variety of modes, and we'll go to an assortment of modes here in just a second. And why do we care? Should we care? Do we care? For me, it's human nature to move around. Just like we need to eat, just like we need to breathe, or have a relationship, we need to move around. And so, how do we move around? And so, for decades and centuries, it's always been the car. And over the lifetime or the span of humanity, we've been able to get to places further and faster. And so it started off with, I guess, walking and carriages back in the day. Now we've gone to the car and to transit and buses, and then around the 80s and 90s, rollerblading and skateboarding took off, and then now we're all probably struggling with e-bikes and e-scooters out there and about, and the kids are going fast on them. There's no regulation on them, so that's like the new innovative form of transportation that we're kind of all struggling with, and we're trying to all navigate that as well. But that's also a mode of transportation, and for me, as long as people are getting to a destination, however possible, let's have it. Let's bring it in. In some cases, we do need to regulate it. We've regulated the car for so many years, for so many decades. we should look at regulating e-bikes and e-scooters as well, because they can be dangerous, not just for the person on the e-bike or e-scooter, but also for the driver as well. Let's see, what do we have? So I want to say, other weird things. If we have the food that we want and we can eat whatever kind of food, or if we want to have the hairstyle of whatever kind we want, why can't we have a mode of transportation of whatever we want to be able to get to the destinations we need to get? So, and all these forms of alternative modes sorry, I forgot to get to the slide first. So I want to point out this slide. I was shown this in my grad school. And so this first slide, of course, the top left, you have all those vehicles. Each vehicle has one person. It's known as a single occupancy vehicle. So look how much space they all take up for 5 lanes of traffic in all those cars. There's 177 cars. On the top right, you can see them without their cars. So the car takes up a lot of space. And then on the bottom left, here's them on all those people on bikes. And then on the bottom right, all of them on 3 buses. It takes 3 buses to move those people around. So to be able to provide the infrastructure for all those cars, that's 5 lanes of traffic, that's all the maintenance that's needed and required to fix and repair that road. And for Colorado, we have to plow our roads as well. So Florida's lucky they don't get to do that. So they, and I remember Vegas struggled with only like 3 plows in their town when they got like an inch of snow, shut down the city. So those are things we have to worry about. So if you can just have an infrastructure for providing a bike lane for those who want to ride a bike, or providing a bus lane for those who want to use the bus, there's less maintenance and there's less cost associated for providing those that type of infrastructure. So I just want to point out that, we have all these different modes, costs are associated with it, and that's a burden on our elected officials to decide what's important. What are we going to invest the money on? If we only have $20 million, where are we going to put it? How do we predict the future of traffic? All right, this is the math part. So modeling is, it's not always great, especially if it's weather. We always look at the weather. I'm going to Buena Vista this weekend, and it's supposed to rain, and I'm hoping it's not. But for engineering and transportation planning, we have numbers that are a bit more concrete, because traffic and human behavior is pretty predictable. We know we have to go to work. We know we have to go to school, for those who go to school. We go out to eat. We go to the movie theaters. We go get gas. Those are all predictable numbers. And I believe it's the Institute, it's ITE, I can't remember. Traffic engineers, that's what it is. I'm not an engineer, I'm a planner, so I'll point that out. So I can't remember that acronym, but they have tons of data. The car's been around for over a century, and it's been producing a lot of data for us to collect and analyze. And so with that, we're able to determine how much traffic each land use generates. And not just each land use. We know land uses as residential, industrial, commercial, office, but we also know land uses as a single family home, an apartment building, a condo building, downtown Denver, fast food, movie theater, business office, all those different types of uses. Yep. Oh, perfect. So these are the different type of uses. And so with a single family home, we're able to predict how many trips are generated. And a trip is somebody leaving their that land use, going out someplace and coming back. That's basically 2 trips. So if you leave your house, go somewhere, you create a trip, you get to that destination and you come back, that's another trip. So that's 2 trips. Homes, single family homes, produce 10 trips a day. And again, that's standard, and that's very predictable. Same thing with an office, and same thing with fast food. We have those numbers, and we can calculate how much traffic they're going to generate per land use, per type of building, I guess. And so we use that to determine what kind of roads are going to go be placed down, whether that's a local road, which most of us probably live on, it's just a 2-lane street, or a collector street, an arterial street, or a freeway. And so we know which, and we know how many lanes to put down based off of these land uses and generating those numbers for traffic.
So I'll just add, and we're going to kind of zoom through because I do want to show you Longmont's maps. The interesting thing, single-family detached homes are pretty high trip generator, and so when developments are coming in and they're being evaluated by the city, ultimately by city council and planning commission, these are the things that are going into the traffic studies. And so you have folks that are presenting that traffic study and saying, this is how much it's going to generate, and this is going to be the impact that it has on your system. We're going to go through this really, really quickly. Do you want to go through this quickly, or do you want me to go through it quickly?
Go for it.
Congestion sucks. We can all agree on that, right? It's horrible. There's two schools of thought. Do we build our way out of it? Do we keep adding capacity? Or do we enhance our existing resources? And jump in here if I butcher this. There's something basically called the triple convergence, or kind of induced demand. People, when it starts to get congested, we've all experienced this. Ken Pratt sucks. So you take Pike, right? People change their route, people travel at a different time, or maybe you decide to ride a bike. When you add capacity, that's great for a little while, and then people realize, oh, there's more capacity now. Like, how many of you remember when they did what was the South I-25 project that they did like 20 years ago? T-Rex. It's like, oh, thank God, they finally added more capacity. Well, I can tell you as a person that's commuting, it sucks now. It's horrible. So, spatial convergence, you're moving back. Modal convergence. People are like, oh great, I don't have to carpool anymore. I don't have to like deal with that person. I'm going back to my car. Or time, now I can go to work at 8 instead of having to get up at 6. So do you build your way out of congestion? It doesn't really work. So I'm just putting that as a plug for council members. There's other things that you can do, right? I'm not going to go through that. Is congestion always bad? I think, yeah, congestion's not great. It's not fun, but your perspective matters. So businesses might like congestion because it gets you to stop and look at their business, and maybe you think like, oh my gosh, that place is cool. If I was going 45, I wouldn't have seen it, but since I'm at 5 miles an hour, I saw it, I'm gonna stop. Slower traffic also can lessen crash severity. And so that's one of the things the city has done a ton of work, and we have some folks in here that could probably talk about this, and Miguel can get to this in Q&A, but thinking about how do we lessen serious injury and fatality. One way is by reducing speeds, and you can't really speed if it's congestion.
One real point well that too, during 2020 when there was nobody on the road, nobody was driving, congestion was down, but severity of crashes went up, meaning there were more rollovers, there were more T-bones, and people dying.
And just real quick, as a kind of nerdy thing, we have a number of ways to measure congestion, and so I get in arguments with my husband all the time about roadways do have capacity, and so there's a volume to capacity ratio, and when that gets above a certain number, the roadway is congested. When it gets above 1. And then we also measure level of service, and so it's kind of like grades on your report card. We all want to have A's. C's might be okay, and if you have F's, then you're in real trouble. So we can look at level of service both for intersection and for roadway segments, so you might hear that talked about. So I'm going to end here. As I mentioned, Longmont adopted a new TMP, Transportation Mobility Plan, earlier this year. I would highly encourage you to go check it out. It has a section on vision and goals. Really, the vision is that Longmont has a safe, comfortable, reliable system that prioritizes people walking, rolling, biking, and taking transit, reducing the dependence on SOBs, as Miguel mentioned. And there's a number of goals within the plan really focused on mobility, leveraging development opportunities, improving our economic vitality, being responsible stewards of our limited resources, and connecting to the region. And so you can see the planning process here. This graphic's available online. I'll end sort of by going through the modes. This is the bicycle network. There's a number of different facility types. And as we look at the system and think about the level of traffic stress, in other words, how comfortable do you feel? How comfortable would your toddler feel? How comfortable might someone who's a world-class cyclist feel? The city has done some measurements and used that along with a bunch of other data to develop this recommended network. And it includes project prioritization and a planning horizon for each of these facilities. Obviously, many of these exist today, but this is a complete recommended system. Also have done a lot of work on the pedestrian network and looking at facility types and standards. This was really done by looking at a pedestrian index, priority index, and this looked at destinations, looked at where people would be walking or where the city would want to encourage walking. And then I'll just put a plug in for the city's Vision Zero activities. And I'm sure someone in this corner can tell me, is the Vision Zero action plan adopted? Is it done? Or are you guys working on that still?
It's still being worked on.
Okay, so opportunities to weigh in there. And again, if you're not familiar with Vision Zero, it's really a movement, a concept.
Yeah, it's a
designed
national
to-
movement to reduce the number of crashes, to reduce the number of crashes and fatalities on our roadways. Because I don't know if you've listened to Pete Buttigieg's statistic, but the number of people dying on our streets per day is one full airplane. And if an airplane a day was crashing, we would be doing something about it. So why aren't
So
we
the
doing it
goal
with
is
our roads?
zero.
Deaths.
So the city's working on that, and there's an opportunity to get involved. Thinking about transit, we didn't talk really about RTD because we didn't have 3 hours, and we now only have 1 minute, so we're not going to talk about it now. But the city's goals around transit are really focused on microtransit. Hopefully you've all had the ability to use Ride Longmont. Investing in our current transit amenities, and then continuing to plan for and invest in fixed route transit. So thinking about those local and regional investments and how we could do some operational enhancements similar to what's happening on the Kaufman Street corridor today. Those are divided up in the plan into short-term and long-term recommendations. And then finally, planning for Longmont's roadway network. Although the city's prioritizing other modes, there's still an incredible number of people that are getting around by car. And so we've can take a look here at the projects that they've identified, and they use a number of different data points around forecasting trade-offs with the other improvements that we want to make for modes, crash data, where are those safety issues, and they have a number of different project types around multimodal safety improvements, new roads, bike projects, and so I would encourage you to take a look at that. And then I'll leave you with this, future of transportation and infrastructure. These were some of our ideas. Smart cities, sustainability, and green infrastructure. Oh my gosh, Mike, you should have asked me that before. I would say invest in centers and corridors to increase density so that you can have more support for transit and walking, and you can really build the city in a more sustainable way, utilizing the utilities and infrastructure that you have.
Everything talking to each other with smart technology, so that way our vehicles can talk to the signals and signals can talk to everything else around it. So, because I know we all hate waiting at that red light and there's no traffic coming through. Why am I waiting?
Okay. Okay. So we're going to do a little Q&A now. And Aaron and Miguel, why don't you come up here and find a seat? And anybody that has questions, well, we have questions. And so I'm not going to be able to remember everybody. I'm just going to start over here, work my way back, and then come back this way. Yes, sir. Give your name.
Paul Hollingshead, local resident. Conspicuous by its absence in the charts has been natural gas, and that's been contentious in a couple of cities that I can think of. Was that not included merely because it's not taken care of by the city?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, natural gas is provided, but natural gas is not provided by the city, which is why I didn't include it. But yes, natural gas is a piece of the energy solution, and certainly something that people are looking at. I mean, I think there's questionable, I don't know if everyone here would consider natural gas a renewable resource. I think that's something we could have a different conversation about, but that's why it was not included here.
Thanks for your questions. I'm moving my way back. So here we go. I'm going to go with these two folks. Move over. Go ahead, Nate.
Dave Hodges. I'm a little bit passionate about this because I lived in Europe for a long time, but could you discuss the impact of the crash data and traffic with implementing roundabouts?
Well, I'll start with for town of Erie. We also adopted our transportation mobility plan, and within it, we're starting with a roundabout first policy. So when a new intersection is going in, especially a major intersection, a roundabout's going to be analyzed first because they are proven to reduce crashes, and the safety benefit increases drastically. And so, gosh, I wish I had those numbers right now. But so that's an approach we're taking. But also, I know there's concern with pedestrians crossings, so we're doing a lot of pedestrian improvements to our roundabouts when they're installed. And so there's not just signage, but that we have the rectangular rapid flashing beacons where the little light flashes like really hard and fast. And then raised crosswalks as well to slow down vehicles when they enter the roundabout.
Roundabouts also help with the environment because you're not idling as long.
Yeah, and they can help with operations for that same reason.
Okay, next question.
Actually, yes.
Two quick questions. It's impossible to turn left in this town. Can we look at the lights and how long it takes? If you're in the lane, you should make the light. It's
There's
about
a city-
4 or 5 cars.
There's a
I've
traffic-
called it literally 10 times.
There's different programs. I would encourage you to go to city council.
Okay.
And I can say that. I mean, just keep going and
Right.
keep, because that's how you get things.
Right. Okay.
So city council.
And then, is it possible for those lights where we're sitting, like out of our community, there's a light that it's very busy during the traffic hours, and then it's not. And we sit there for about 3 minutes, and on a good time, it's 1.5 minutes. I've timed it. Can we just make them flashing? How do we get that done?
So that would be something you'd need to talk with the city's transportation department about, but signals can be timed.
Okay. I called on that too.
Reach out to the employees, transportation employees, and then as well as your council as well. Really make your voice heard, because we do look at those, at least with the town of Erie.
Keep it.
All right. Hi, Amy Schmidt. I had a question. It's kind of a higher level one. Whatever you can speak to or not. I know it's a big question too. How much does your work or the city's work take into account non-economic costs of development and or some less anthropocentric views like corridors and transportation and like sharing space with non-human species?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I'd say that the city's planning work certainly over time, I mean, the comprehensive plan is just that, it's comprehensive, and so it tries to look at a number of topics. I would say that's probably most addressed kind of with the planning department's work with sustainability, and really thinking about how can you have, for example, how do you have wildlife movement corridors? It's always a push-pull, and I think sustainability's one of those things. A lot of people think about it as environmental sustainability. So it's a balance, right? Do you develop corridors within the city and leave the areas on the outside for wildlife? How do you encourage those movement corridors? I think the city, I would say through, and I don't know what the department names are now, but the open space, parks, sustainability folks work closely with the city's planning department, and there is a sustainability planner that you could probably reach out to. His name is Zach. And he might have some thoughts on kind of how that actually works in practice, but it is something that's considered at kind of a base level.
Okay, yeah, I just was wondering if there is synergy or high level things.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall in the planning field there is sort of a movement to think more holistically, and that's always kind of growing and evolving and thinking how can we do things better, how can we have less impact or a more positive impact on the world we live in, how can we do things more sustainably, more resiliently, and so that certainly would be a part of that.
On that same topic, Shaquille, on that same topic, can you talk about ways that building infrastructure can be good for the environment? Because I think there's an implicit assumption that building things is always bad, but is that always true?
I mean, I would say my opinion is that's not always true. I think there's lots of examples where we've been able to build more efficient, more sustainable, more environmentally friendly infrastructure. I'll give an example of a project in Erie at their town center at County Line and Erie Parkway. They've put in an entire system to manage stormwater that's under a parking lot, and so they've been able to use land efficiently to manage their stormwater. It's not taking additional land, and so I would suggest that's more environmentally friendly. It's like kind of a smart method of smart growth. I think you can also point to, as you're undergrounding power lines, that potentially reduces the risk for wildfire and destructive fire behavior. So I think there's lots of examples that you could point to where building infrastructure and frankly even expanding. I mean, the map that we looked at of Longmont's planning area, that's planned growth, right? And so, I mean, unless you don't have kids, then you can't really be opposed to growth, right? Like we're all growing, and so that growth is going to require new or upgraded infrastructure. And so I think if you can figure out a way to do that in a way that's at a minimum neutral and not going to harm the environment, but hopefully, I mean, certainly we've had tons of technology increases, and I'll say when we looked at Longmont's water data, our per capita data, I mean, we were able to really show that we weren't using more water even though we're adding population, and part of that was because our fixtures were becoming so much more efficient. Our land use patterns were becoming so much more efficient. So I would suggest that as we continue to grow in those more sustainable, responsible ways, it's not really harmful to grow your infrastructure. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. My name is Ross. I have a question for the audience. Who all here has actually ridden a bus in Longmont? Hey, better than I hoped. I'd encourage the rest of you to give it a try sometime.
And are they still free?
They are.
What's the density of Longmont? We hear so much about transit and using buses, and what do we have to do, and where do we have to do it to get there? How far are we away?
Do you want the real answer? Or do you want
I want the real answer.
I think
you know me.
The density varies widely. I think, I looked at this, but it's probably been years. I would say the overall density of Longmont is probably 3 to 4 dwelling units per acre. There's a lot of nuance with that. You could look at specific neighborhoods. I've done that analysis in Prospect. That's an area where I think people would say, oh, it's a really dense neighborhood. That neighborhood overall is about 8 units per acre, the downtown being a little more dense, maybe close to 14. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers. It's easy to calculate. You can go and look at the assessor's data, count the number of lots if it's a single-family detached home, and divide dwelling units per acre. But I think the majority of the neighborhoods that I would guess most of us live in, the single-family detached neighborhoods, are probably in the 3 to 4 range. And if you have a smaller lot, patio home or maybe much smaller lots, those can be in the 6 to 7 unit range, which is barely transit supportive. I mean, that's a real stretch, which is kind of the problem that many Western cities have because, again, they were developed after the automobile was prevalent. Most people have cars, and so there wasn't a need to build our cities in a way that accommodated transit. And so, again, my idea that I suggested to Mike, focusing on those centers and corridors and building those in a way that supports transit with density that's, dare I say, 25, 30, 50 units per acre, and Roosevelt Park apartments are 55 units per acre, and I think that's a nice project, so I'll just say that. That could really move the needle. You're not going to provide transit to everyone's doorstep, and that's never the intention. But then you can look at those first and last mile connections, whether that be, sounds like you're not a fan of e-bikes and e-scooters, but whether that be e-bikes and e-scooters, regular bikes, walking, there's lots of different first and last mile connections that you could then institute to serve kind of those transit nodes that might be able to be built in those centers and corridors. And that's where I would say you could probably focus rather than trying to retrofit the whole city.
I'm Jackie Hada, just a senior resident, and very, in theory, committed to public transportation, but we live in near Roosevelt Park, and I see these empty buses all the time, and I wonder why we don't use smaller vehicles. I mean, or something more fuel efficient, smaller vehicles, because nobody's riding.
Yeah, unfortunately, when working with RTD, there was no difference in cost savings or efficiency in output of what comes out of the bus for reducing the bus size. But yes, but with the exception of maybe switching over to an electric bus, that might be more beneficial. But
Is
then
that because of federal funding? That's what I assume. Maybe that they couldn't fund smaller vehicles. You could only fund the large vehicles.
they might be restricted based on the type of route it is. They're probably restricted on what type of bus they have to provide, and then also for the driver as well, because there's a lot of red tape tied to the driver for the bus as well. But then also I want to mention that Longmont started their free ride, which is a microtransit service. So that is a call and ride service. I believe it's $2 for Longmont to be able to get anywhere within Longmont. And so there's that opportunity as well, where it's a door-to-door service, and it's a smaller vehicle, so it's not a full-on bus. So.
It's a car, and for seniors it's $1.
Longmont Ride, great service, $2 for seniors, and under 15, I believe, is also $1 as well. Scott Stewart, question. Congestion in Longmont is not just Longmont traffic. A lot of this is actually through traffic. If you can't afford a home in Longmont, you might go farther out east. Your job might be in Boulder or what have you. Do you guys have an opinion on ring roads or? Oh, I love the expression. Please go.
Well, I think that kind of leads to the slide that we had with the induced traffic, where you put down a new road and it's like, oh, this is amazing, and it's just going to take everybody to that road, and you're just going to provide more congestion on a new road that money could have been spent elsewhere to provide and improve existing infrastructure as well. So.
I would also suggest some of the origin and destination studies. Maybe I'll talk about trips. Each trip is an origin and a destination, right? So home to work, home to school. There's actually not as many through trips as you would imagine in Longmont. They've done studies along Main Street, along Cape Pratt Boulevard. Certainly there are folks that travel through Longmont to get to other destinations, but it's really not as extensive, and certainly the city could probably give you that data. I have in my mind that it's under 20%, but I don't quote me on that. I will say, probably 30% of our residents also work in Longmont, and so 60% of our residents are going elsewhere. 60% of our employees are coming from elsewhere, and so those origins may be elsewhere, but their destination is here. And so that's just a factor of the world we live in, right? I would suggest that maybe focusing on alternative modes and thinking about how might we get here another way besides a single occupant vehicle. You think about, for example, the tri-towns, right? There's a lot of folks that are within the St. Vrain Valley School District that travel from a residence to a school or from a residence to a work or vice versa, folks that are working out there. Their only option is to drive. There's no other option. There's no transit. Ride Longmont goes out to the east side or the west side of 25, but then what? So, I would say, thinking about the future of transportation, is there a way that we could really build out our bicycle infrastructure similar to what's happening on 119, and people could start using e-bikes? If you had a mode shift of 10%, that could be a significant reduction in congestion, and that could potentially help with the growth of the future volume, and so maybe thinking more broadly. And then I would also say that rather than focusing on adding capacity or thinking about a ring road, which would be astronomically expensive, could potentially take traffic away from the corridors where businesses are located, which could be problematic for tax revenues and a whole host of other things. Maybe focus on intersection improvements and thinking about how do you manage the volume, how do you work with employers to provide off-peak work schedules. There's a number of different things you could do. We didn't get into it today, but there's a whole school of thought around something called transportation demand management, and that's really thinking about alternatives and how you could maybe encourage mode shift, hour shift, kind of the opposite of that triple convergence that we talked about. And so there's a whole line of thinking about other ways that you might deal with that beyond building a new facility, which frankly is just financially probably unfeasible. And from a land perspective, is there anyone here that lives on Pace that would be okay with that? Probably not, right?
Thank you very much for your answer, and thank you for coming tonight.
Who else on this row? Anybody in this row? Keep on going. Thank you for your question. Yes, moving up the...
I'd just add to that really quick too. By doing that, by providing the ring road, you're just giving a gift to those bypassers instead of giving that money, the gift to your own residents. And then when that new bypass road would come in, Walmart's going to see that and new traffic. I want to build a Walmart out there. Buc-ee's is going to come by and we want to put a gas station out there. And now you have a whole new development. Now you just induced more traffic.
Ed Howland. I'm a relatively new resident to the area. Do y'all have any recommendations on how to improve the supposed maybe dream of a train coming through town? I went to the city council sort of presentation on this thing, and they said, RTD's goal is January 1st, 2029, and they're looking at 3 trains in the morning, 3 trains at night, and that's about it. I commute to Denver 3 days a week. I would love this thing, but the setup now sounds like it's iffy at best, which means that people aren't going to buy into it. We're going to have a hard time getting people to commit, probably fall on its face, and then people are going to go, oh, well, we were right. Is there anything that we can do in preparation of this goal that we can help support usage of this thing so that it actually builds and is sustainable for the long term?
So the plan that they have, the service plan that they have, and the station locations, the stations where they're at, tell your city council to densify that station and put all the land uses, high density, commercial, mixed use, residential, places where people go and want to use transit. That's a transit oriented development, and that's what's really going to take off the train. And because you need people to ride the train, and if people aren't living near the train station, then you're not going to have sufficient ridership. And
I have so much to add. I'll talk to you afterwards. Well, okay. I would say that, to the point, I'm seeing all these buses that are empty. We need to prove out transit in our region. People in the West, we're not a transit society, and so to me, this very narrow vision of should we have a Northwest Rail or should we have rail up by 25? The answer is probably yes, but we need to find funding for that. And until we figure out how we're going to pay for that,
We've already paid for it.
well, we've paid for the Northwest Rail. Yeah, and I'm not from RTD, so I'm not going to get into an argument.
That's the answer on that. And
We've
also
yeah.
you that he says of Longmont RTD, right?
I think it's a frustrating thing, and we could talk for frankly days about what needs to happen with RTD, and I'm sure we all have lots of opinions about that. As a person who doesn't have access to transit where I live, it's incredibly frustrating. And you see them build entire transit systems in other countries in a 20-year period. We've been working on fast tracks for 20 years. So I don't think there's a good answer. I think it's going to take lots of change at the state and federal level, and I'm not confident that that's going to happen in my using transit lifetime. But I think continuing to advocate, to your point, we've paid funds. Those funds are committed to the city for building infrastructure at First and Main. They will ultimately probably support BRT initially. I think that could be a reasonable way to get to Denver, right? It's not the train that everyone wants, but geez, it's something. Let us have our First and Main transit station, and then to Miguel's point, that creates some real estate and development opportunities. That could be something we work towards.
I wouldn't be so upset if we hadn't already paid for it. If there was an alternative to have a bus or a train, but we've already paid for it. So
Next question. Thank you.
Hi, Aaron. Good to see you. How can we expand our definition of infrastructure to begin to include larger long-term thinking around climate-induced and exacerbated natural disasters, floods, urban wildfires? We've seen what happened with the Marshall Fire here locally, $3 billion worth of damage, over 1,000 homes. The government is defunding USGS water, stream gauge, flood gauge monitoring. So our awareness of natural disasters, our ability to respond to that in real time, places in Europe are including infrastructure such as towers to spray water, particularly in Spain, that have a 1,000-foot radius to put out urban wildfire threats. Digital twin technology is also smart city technology, sensors, things to address these kind of disasters are also part of the thinking around infrastructure. Any thoughts on this? I know it's kind of cutting edge, but just your thoughts.
Yeah, I think digital twins. I know the city has started looking at that. Don't know where they're at with that. I think there's a lot of work that could be done, and sort of maybe from Longmont's perspective, as they start thinking about updating their long-range plans, as they start thinking about their sustainability and resilience plans, Those are all good questions, I think, to have with the community. Really, it comes down to what is your community's value and where do you want to place your limited resources, right? So I think that's really the question. And as you're planning for infrastructure and thinking about where you're going to invest, let's be honest, where we don't have enough resources for the need. And so how are you going to prioritize those investments? And I think if the community says this is what's most important, then that's how you fund those types of things. But you need to have that in a plan. And so I'd say, pushing for updating, maybe targeted updates to the sustainability plan, to the comprehensive plan, to some of those master plans that we talked about, to really think about how we integrate some of that cutting edge science and those new best practices and evolving technologies.
Okay, Alex, go ahead.
Aaron Miguel, thank you. My name is Alex Kalkoffer. For city planners, what is the best way for residents and citizens to get involved, either to provide feedback or kind of be part of the conversation for transportation mobility?
Yeah, I'll start from a high level, and then I know Miguel's done a lot of great work with neighborhood traffic mitigation in Erie. I think the best way for residents to get involved is to get involved early and at the right stage. And so we just talked about some of the master plans, the comp plan. Show up and to council and talk about what's important to you rather than showing up and talking about what you don't like. Participate in the city's budget discussions. I was always surprised, both when I worked at Longmont and Erie, that the city would pass these tens of millions or hundreds of $1 million budgets and no residents would come, but then a neighborhood with 9 houses would draw 50 people that were talking about the destruction of our community. And so I would say for residents to really get involved and to talk about what's important, to advocate for funding certain things, to meet with your council members. I think most council members are open to meeting, attend coffee with council, serve on an advisory board where you can really start to have an impact on what decisions are made, what recommendations are made to council. Those are all things that I would do at a high level.
Yeah, a couple of things. If you know an employee at the town or city, get in contact with them. If you want to learn about something, they're willing to have those conversations with you. So if you want to learn about the rail and the station planning and what to do to help make that reality come true, or that thought come true, start with those conversations with the employees. And then you can also go to the city council, and every city council, I think they're required to have a public comment session. And so you're allowed 3 minutes to just rant about whatever you want and just go ahead. Or provide constructive feedback, yes, and give thanks if you'd like. So yes.
Suggest new ideas.
Yes, suggest new ideas, or just complain about the traffic light that is why am I waiting here for 3 minutes? And you might have to do that repetitively, but then also maybe bring some other friends and neighbors to make the same comments, because they will respond to it.
Thank you. All right, we have 10 minutes, and I'd like to break down into small groups, 3 people, 4 people, whatever that looks like. And we're going to answer one question. That's all. Just one question. So start turning your chairs and do whatever you need to do.
It's going all right. I'm Ryan. Okay, there we go. I'm back. Okay. Well,
Okay, so everybody, the question is going to be, and this is, I may not have your attention here. Okay. We're going to answer question 4 on the sheet you have, folks. Question 4. Start talking about question 4 right now. So if someone needs to record, do a little recording. Question 4. Question 4.
I biked for a couple years, but I did not try.
One of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking to someone.
You know that. Going, my son's yes, exactly. He's like, I need to get up there at 9:30 a.m. and the next bus is It's not a direct rap. It's more, it's what's that more bad, I guess.
Okay, a couple more minutes. Make sure each person has their chance. Okay, folks, pick someone who's going to report out. Pick someone who's going to report out. Pick someone who's going to report out. Okay, we have the first group ready to report out, folks.
I wish I
Thank you for your attention. We'll start with me. I'm Gene Calf. We promised to like a step meeting. Commit to use Ride Longmont for some things, because we haven't actually tried that, so we're going to try that. One of our people. We are going to commit to consolidate trips. Am I doing the right thing? Okay, good. I'm going to commit to ride my bike to school. Yeah, and one of the things I thought was really interesting was doing like more off commuter trips, because we have somebody in our group who needs to commute with a car, but off commuting trips for errands and that sort of thing, to use an e-bike that they recently got to reduce the congestion on the roads.
That's a hard act to follow. Thank you. Good job. All right. Good. All right. I'm gonna go with this group now.
My name is Gabriel, and we have collectively decided that we're going to commit to, it's maybe a small step, but we're going to commit to continuing to use our voices and our ears to transition away from single occupant vehicles to more multimodal options. Basically, keep the conversation going. So, basically just keep that conversation going, trying to get into more of those multimodal options.
Thank you very much. Okay, give him a hand, folks. Let's keep up here.
Hi everybody, at Highland. We're making a promise to use our bike for longer range trips and more of them. Get out of the car, pedal some more, and see more of the city while we do it.
Let's go. Next group. We're going to go right here.
Hi, I'm Shaquille. Our group, one person in our group committed to using Ride Longmont and giving it a try as an alternative method of transportation. I suggested that it would be that I will work to try and increase the number of bike trips in the city by making it safer for more people, so that it could increase demand. And then I thought the most interesting idea in our group was someone who said that they were going to try to exercise more compassion for other people while using our transportation network. They recounted a city that they used to live in, where people were much nicer to each other on transportation, and it was just a happier place. And I thought that was a really cool idea.
I love it. A commitment to less road rage. I love it.
Can you use it on date night?
All right, here we go. Back to this group.
Okay. Our group didn't commit as a group. We have individual things going on. One member has committed to quality service to autos, so at least our autos are efficient. Exposing kids to alternative transportation so they'll be more likely to use them as they grow up. And then advocating for better transportation solutions at council, including roundabouts, having lanes for electric bikes, scooters, and golf carts for people who've lost their licenses as they age.
Great. Good job. All right. Give him a hand.
Hello, Susie Valgo-Faring. So some of the promises we made was, we have somebody who has an electric vehicle, so ensuring that, we continue to use that type of option. Using alternate modes of transportation whenever possible. So bikes, I live near a grocery store, so I walk or use my bike, using those pieces. And I use Ride Longmont, being on the council. Seeing that come through, I'm like, I gotta use it, and it's easy. You just use it as an app. And then advocating for at dangerous intersections, advocating, something I'm doing on council as well, is the Mayors and Commissioners Coalition is advocating for the money so we can get these things taken care of.
All right. Coming soon. Susie on a bus. All right. Here we go.
I'm Alex Kalkoffer. We also came up with individual things that we are willing to do. So one of them is me holding RTD accountable. I'm on the transportation board, so I'm going to hold RTD accountable for not forgetting about us and Longmont and getting us the service that we deserve. Other people said that they are willing to speak up and voice their opinions. We had a couple people say that. Another person said that they're willing to also take transportation if transportation is within 3/4 of a mile from them. And then also reduce the use of single occupant vehicles, walk, bike, and willing to see.
Remember, these are all said in public, they're on video, and so we're all going to remember the level of chosen accountability you have selected. Here we go.
All right, I'm Ryan Forbes, and our group said that we would advocate more publicly for improving transportation in Longmont, which says a lot because one of the people in our group is on the Transportation Advisory Board. The other one, and another one, is on the Vision Zero Task Force. So we're going to do more in part by, as Alex said, sticking it to RTD because they need to kick in the pants. And then the other one is improving zoning to allow for more modes of transportation. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. All right. Here's a group back here.
Real quick, Scott Stewart. Common theme here. Most people are talking about Ride Longmont. If you're serious about Ride Longmont, it's an app. Download it before you go to sleep tonight. We also have commitments to ride bikes more and attend the planning and zoning and transportation meetings. It's great. And I also plan on continuing to hassle all my friends. I've been doing it for the last 9 years, getting an electric vehicle.
So Scott, this is our community and it's our government. You're all part of this group.
I'll keep it really short. A couple of us have got an EV and planning to keep it. We have committed to riding our bikes more. I ride my bike with my daughters to school. I've committed to observing more and continue submit more service tickets. If you guys have never done it when things are broken, the city's actually very good and fast at repairing things when they break on roads. I encourage everybody else to do that.
Okay, this group is catching on to personal responsibility. This is great. We're getting better as we go. Okay, that's it for tonight. Now, 2 weeks from tonight, we're going to meet here again for our last topical session on how to create more social capital and how to put all the things we've talked about in place on a more personal level. So we got some great speakers coming, and so I hope to see you all in 2 weeks. Don Haddad, for a treat, and Kirsten. And so anyway, she owns Ace Hardware here, and we're going to talk about the meaning of social capital and how that can be surfaced and activated in a way that can really be much more advantageous and beneficial to our community. So with that, I want to say drive, walk, or bike safely home tonight. And good evening. Thank you all for being here.